Hey traders, this is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, February 3rd. This was the first trading day of the month, and probably a little bit of money being put to work today. That's usually what happens on the first day of the month. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Talk about what I traded today, but let me go over kind of the central theme of the day, which was basically, I think, a bounce from short-term oversold levels. Right, I think going into Friday, or coming out of Friday, it was pretty nasty in terms of an unwinding of equity exposure, risk exposure. I think we've been seeing that the last couple Fridays, where investment managers, investors just don't want to hold a lot of risk into the weekend. So we've been seeing a bit of unwinding. Friday was a bit more dramatic. I think people were worried about what was going to happen China come Monday and so forth. So we saw a decent unwinding of risk. That really hurt the technicals pretty bad. A lot of breakdowns that we saw. Not a full out breakdown, but just a lot of sectors starting to move down and break trend line support, so forth. And so what did we get today? So today I think we got that oversold bounce, and it's tough to really come away with a conclusion for today because we have all inside days. And if you're not familiar with that term, I'll explain it. But let's talk a little bit about the price action for today. SPY, we basically finished right where we started for the day. So this is again one of those, I thought, depending on like how quickly you can trade, and if you're day trading and scalping, uh, you may have had more success if you're really good at doing that type of thing. But if you're more of a swing trader, I think, I don't want to say a difficult day, but basically we closed right where we opened for the day. So we did, that is right above value, but I don't think really there's much to conclude from today if that's what you're looking for. And that's of course what I'm looking for too, is some type of conclusion. But let's look at this in terms of, rather than with the S&P futures, we'll look in terms of this with SPY. Notice that the price action was all inside of Fridays, so that means an inside day, right? That's by definition an inside day, and the takeaway from that is basically you can't conclude anything. That's also, if you look up the definition of what an inside day is. Qs, I think you had more range today, but that's also by definition an inside day. So it's nice to see that there was a bounce for the day. If you happen to go long at the end of the day on Friday, you could kind of take things off for profits today. You could day trade a couple things today. I'll go over some of the option activity today. But also IWM, which got hit worse last week, you also have an inside day there as well. So what I did today was not much. My goal for the day, and of course I put together two videos on Sunday for just kind of what I was thinking with, not only with markets and technicals and internals, which we always look at, but also with the coronavirus and my interpretation of what's going on, and how it's impacting the market, and how much longer it could possibly impact the market, and kind of some things to look at. So we covered all that on during Sunday's videos. So now and where I kind of left that was, I think it's going to take some time for this to straighten itself out. And also, when I'm looking for setups for swing trades, usually after a big red day, it usually takes a little while for the markets to kind of come in and kind of provide some more signals. So that's kind of where I am for the day, and of course what I look for when we do have dips is for some of those like higher quality names, like names that I really like within either tech, consumer discretionary, healthcare, things like that. I will go to my favorite names when we've got that, because I want to own quality when we've got a decent dip in the market. So let's just go back to the S&P chart here for a second, and then I'll talk about a couple other things. So I mentioned it's the first day of the month, first trading day of the month, and so that means basically there's usually some new money that gets put to work on the first trading day of the month, and it's a 1 day thing. So if you could take advantage of that in your trading, that's great. But after that day, there's no follow through, right? It's basically just that. So I think that also helped. One thing that I noticed too with market breadth, it never really got really strong. From where it was this morning. I'll go back to the 5 minute here just for a second, and then I'll talk about the technicals. But if we just zoom in on this, you could see right around the open, till about 10 o'clock, which is where we peaked out, a little bit after 10 o'clock. And then we just kind of, market breadth really just subsided all day long. So that's not my favorite look. And I think that's, going back to the market action, we had an inside day. And you could see bonds had strength today too. So they were buying the dip. At one point, TLT was down about 1% on the day. And that had more of a range to it from where it opened. So we'll go back to my spreadsheet here, just to reference that. But where's TLT? It was up 40 basis points from where it opened. And you could see SPY up 25 basis points from where it opened. Altogether up what, three quarters of a percent, and of course Qs were the best performer on the day. So before I go into sectors, we'll talk a little bit about the chart for S&P. It's still right at the 50-day moving average. So I'm trying to let this kind of work its way through. The other thing that I noticed, besides market breadth not being crazy strong, and trailing off through the day, was the VIX is still around an 18, right? So that should tell you a little bit. If you're trading options, it's going to be more expensive for you to get in and out of trades because of the higher volatility. It's going to cost you more to put a trade on, but also it just kind of gives you a sense of that there is still a decent amount of volatility present. I'm kind of looking for that to go back below 15 for a little bit of confirmation. Now, what will happen with that is the market will also be going up. Usually, when that happens, so I'm kind of just letting this play out a little bit more. And then, of course, what I'll be looking for as we go through the week, and especially I'll be, going through some charts tonight, just looking to see where there was relative strength in the market, and what else is setting up technically. But again, I've mentioned, when we have these rips in the market, like up like this, we're coming in and checking support. Where I make money, and everybody's different, right? Because I'm a trend trader. I make a lot of money when this happens, because I stick with the trend. When we start to break down like this and we've got a lot of big back and forth movement, now I can make money on those days too, day trading, but swing trading, it's very difficult, right? And if you look at what I like to do is talk about when we've had these similar moves. Notice that we had a little bit of false moves in here a couple times. This was last year, remember, from the December low. So again, this is a different move. Not all upswings are going to be exactly the same, but you can kind of take away a little bit from this. So notice here we had a little bit of a pullback to the 20-day moving average, never got to the 50, and we kind of got going. This just tells me it's a little bit different because of the swings in the price action. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we get something like this. Even a few more down days. Like, if we break. So again, I talk negative because I'm concerned more about the risk than the return. Especially when we lose the upside trend, and we're hanging on to that upside trend, because if not, we've got the 200-day moving average down here, but we're hanging on by a thread. Like I said, we had an inside day today. If we break below value for the month, then there's this VPOC to be taken out, right? So that I'm kind of, I've got money on the sidelines for that in case that happens. Am I adding a little bit of risk in here? Yeah, I am. But I think you kind of have to have the game plan that what if we go down here? Uh, and that's also why I'm trading a little bit more stock, because if you buy stock here and we end up going down here, and this is a short-term phenomenon, and then we end up back up here, you could recoup those losses. if you're in short-term options and we end up going down here, it's going to be very difficult for you to make that money back. So positioning here is very, very important in my opinion. Again, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any recommendations and so forth. But I see like just the I don't want to. I'm not sure if angst is the right word, but I think a lot of retail traders, as soon as they see a dip, they're like, "Yes, I've been waiting for a dip." But just keep, and they're like, well, "What's the trade? I want to go in. I want to go back into the market. We finally got a dip." Just keep in mind, this is a very different condition than what we were doing before. The price is below the 20, the 5. We're hanging on barely to the bottom value. So I don't necessarily think that this is done with. It could be, the volatility that we saw last week. The other thing that I would be watching for too, every time that there's a headline about this coronavirus, the market seems to want to push lower and wants to sell off. So I think we want to get to the point where we get new headlines out about the virus and the market doesn't fall apart. It does, volatility doesn't jump. So I don't think that that's played out yet because let's say there are a couple cases that keep happening in the U.S. What do you think is going to happen to the market? Right now, the way it's reacting, it's probably going to sell off. But so that's why I'm saying like I don't think that volatility is completely done yet. So that's my take. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope we go back to 52-week highs sooner than later. But I'm positioned right now for being conservative here and seeing if this goes down. Price actually breaks the 50-day moving average and gets down to here, and then that's where I want to be more aggressive with buying the dip. But I just think it's too soon. Here's my trades. Here's some of the things that I did today. I was in a little bit of TAL. Kind of took a shot at this. This is the Chinese. This was the only company that I was basically long or had like China exposure. But they're the ones that do the education at home, and that kind of makes sense, right? Intuitively, because these kids are going to be basically not going to school for a little while, so it's the home tutor company. So this worked pretty well. I got rid of this, as you could see, 3 minutes after the open. Baba, we also saw a lot of Baba weekly calls, so I traded a little bit of stock with this one, and I said it may be a day trade, and I wasn't really picky with taking that off. I think these Chinese internet names, got the bounce, but again, we don't know, if this is going to be a short-lived thing or not. There is a VPOC up here, which I was trying to. That's where I was setting my sights to, but I don't think it's worth it to have a big position in Chinese internets right now. I think it's going to be hard enough with U.S. names, personally. But again, that's my opinion. Everybody's a little bit different. Go back to this. So that ended up being a day trade. I did add some shares of AMD. That's again, one of these names that I've been looking to buy on the dip. AMD, it did fine today, but we don't know. Like if this breaks back below value, make sure I've got the right chart on here. Whoops. I want daily 10. Yeah, so it's in value, but there's no confirmation. It's not taking out any of this prior price action. So we'll have to see where that goes. It did close at 48, which I think I bought around 47, was it? But I kept it on. Where's my trade? I did long 46. Where's my price? I don't know why it's not in there. That's weird. Maybe I'm just not. Maybe I'm missing it. But Alibaba. I also took off Okta. That was a name that I got into last week. I didn't like how it wasn't performing well, where with everything else in Nasdaq was. Salesforce. This was a small trade that I added into weakness on Friday. Again, one of those names that I'm looking at again and again right now because I like the technical pattern. Palladium. I'll put this out on Twitter later tonight, but this is the Palladium ETF. Notice it's consolidating here. So this looks a little bit better. And again, it's a commodity. but I'm looking at 226. PALL is the ETN that covers palladium rather than covering than trading the future itself. What else? I'm long a little bit of PG from Friday. I added to that. I tried TTD, which is a day trade. That name will remain on my watch list. I took it off at the end of the day. Again, just a little bit chicken and not holding. You're trying to hold less overnight exposure than usual until I think this thing is kind of worked its way through. So that's the whole thing for me is to be a little bit more cautious into this and be smart and not give back my profits from the beginning of the year so far. So playing a little bit of defense, which the 49ers should have done last night, was probably play a little bit more defense instead of taking that picture in the end zone after they caught the interception. But I'm just joking around. But yeah, so that's kind of what I see, and I'm setting up for not just like one day's price action, which again I don't think that you can conclude too much out of today because we got inside days, and kind of having a little bit of a longer term view than just one day. Oh, option activity. This was great if you caught it. Zoom was up 15%. We did see some calls right out of the open. The story that I read on Bloomberg, and I think it got a broker price target raised too, but this Microsoft Teams was down today. So also you have to figure with people traveling less. Zoom may be what people are using instead of traveling to do some online meetings. Really nice move and a nice hop over this VPOC. I think right in here is where we saw the call buying, but wow, I wish I would have followed a bit. Of course, the other big story was Tesla today. We'll have to see where Tesla goes, right? Like I think a lot of people are trying to now short this into this, but it does kind of seem like a blow off top. But I'm not going to get in front of a runaway train right now. I mean, usually this is a blow off top when you've got big volume after already a big move, but it's moving it's too much for my speed. Because even like I know some people were thinking about once it peaked out here to kind of short it, and unless you covered here, it's basically back to the highs. So there's too much momentum I think to go to try to fade this thing, even though it doesn't look realistic. And especially I'm using that word again, it does look like a blow off top, but there's no reversal candle, especially when something closes on its highs. So it'll be a fun one to watch for the rest of the week. Guys, have a great night. And here's the other option activity. There's a few other things. You could probably put Disney in here too, which continues to see call buying into their earnings report. Square was another one. I mentioned AMD Work, maybe along those same lines of Zoom. I looked at Work a couple times today, Slack. It did not trigger fully. I'm looking on the 1 hour, and I had an alert set at 21. It hit, but it did not. This bar did not close there. So again, technicals. I think for me, technicals and my rules are greater than seeing option activity on the tape. But again, that's my system. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.